Hey there, come closer to the fire, because tonight we are opening a clay tablet that does not describe a monster in the usual way. The word pressed into the ancient record is Gallu. It is small when spoken, but it carries a heavy sound, like a door closing somewhere below the earth. In the oldest Sumerian sense, the word is tied to being carried off, dragged away, removed from the place where breath still belongs. That is the first chill of the story. These were not demons that came because they were hungry, jealous, amused, or bored. They came because something had been authorized. Imagine that for a moment. A presence at the edge of a room, not angry, not laughing, not eager, only waiting with the patience of a court official who already knows the verdict. A soul has been named. A boundary has been crossed. A debt has entered the underworld ledger. And the thing that arrives does not need to hate you to take you away. That is the darker truth inside these old records. The Gallu were feared because they did not behave like chaos. They behaved like law. They belonged to the Anunnaki order, to the underworld offices, to the cold machinery that kept life and death from spilling into each other. If these quiet journeys through ancient tablets, underworld courts, and the strange fears of the first cities keep you listening, leave a like and subscribe. It helps keep this small candle burning for the next traveler who finds these old names in the dark. Now, let the room settle around us. The fire is low. The candle is steady. We will walk gently, because some claims in the source are debated, and the ancient texts are never as simple as a modern horror story wants them to be. But the core image is clear enough. In Mesopotamia, death was not only an ending, it was a jurisdiction. The tablet waits under soft light. Picture it resting on a padded table in a museum archive. The clay is dry. The color of dust after rain has long forgotten it. Wedge marks cover its surface in neat little wounds. A gloved hand turns it carefully. The room smells faintly of paper, stone, cold air, and the metallic patience of locked cabinets. Around it are other tablets, some about grain, some about offerings, some about kings, some about dreams, some about the dead. Then the word appears. Gallu, a word that seems to step out from the line. The source begins by following the word through Sumerian and Akkadian traditions, where it changes shape, but keeps its dark center. In Sumerian, it is linked to taking away, carrying off, dragging from one state into another. In Akkadian and later Mesopotamian demonological traditions, Gallu and related forms keep the sense of a being connected to death, judgment, and removal. The important thing is not only the word, it is the job. The Gallu are not wandering shadows. They are not simply restless dead. They are not the bitter ghost of a neglected person scratching at a doorway. They are appointed beings. In the source, they appear as active agents of abduction, but not in the crude sense of a creature stealing for pleasure. Their removal of souls belongs to a system. That system is the underworld, not a place of wild flames and uncontrolled shrieking, not a place where every horror runs loose in a crowd. Mesopotamian underworld thought could be bleak. Yes, and deeply frightening, but it was also organized. There were gates, thrones, officials, judges, scribes, queenly authority, decrees, ritual procedures, obligations between the living and the dead. Death, in this world, had paperwork in its soul. That may sound almost funny at first. Ancient bureaucracy follows you even below the ground. But the humor fades quickly. A chaotic demon might be avoided by luck. A hungry spirit might be fed. A jealous demon might be appeased. But an officer carrying a lawful order is more difficult. You cannot charm procedure with a clever speech. You cannot flatter a verdict that has already been sealed. You cannot run from a jurisdiction that includes the road under your feet. The Gallu were terrifying because they represented that cold certainty. In the early sacred city of Nippur, the source says tablets preserve references to them within temple and underworld contexts. Nippur was not just any settlement. It was one of the great sacred centers of Mesopotamia, linked to Enlil, divine authority, and the ordering of the world. Imagine its temple courtyards in the early morning. Dust over packed earth. Priests carrying offerings. Scribes moving between rooms with tablets pressed to their chests. The smell of oil, wool, grain, clay, and smoke. In such a city, spiritual fear was not vague. It had offices. It had correct rituals. It had consequences if the rites were neglected. The Gallu belonged to that imagination. They were not described as common troublemakers. They were more like elite servants of the great below, beings trusted with a duty most gods and humans alike would rather not face directly. Their work began where ordinary life ended, or where someone tried to blur the line too dangerously. When a person died properly, with rites, offerings, burial, and recognition, the transition could be handled within the expected pattern. But when someone resisted death by forbidden magic, neglected the dead, crossed underworld boundaries, practiced necromancy without sanction, or entered a divine legal crisis, the Gallu could be sent. They were the correction, the hand from below. The source contrasts them with other Mesopotamian supernatural beings. This matters because demonology in Mesopotamia was not a basket into which every frightening thing was thrown. Categories mattered. Names mattered. Functions mattered. The Utuku might be understood as spirits or demons, connected in some cases to restless dead, unpredictable, hungry for recognition, dangerous because transition had failed. Lamashtu was personal and malicious, attacking mothers and infants out of a twisted appetite that ancient families feared deeply. The Gallu were different. They had no personal story with you. No anger. No envy. No private wound. They did not crouch outside the door because your happiness offended them. They came because the system had turned its face toward you. Honestly, that is a more mature kind of terror. Not the panic of a beast in the dark, but the dread of hearing your name called in a courtroom where the judge has already read the file. The source presents the Gallu as underworld enforcers, and this phrase is almost exact in feeling. A guide may comfort. A messenger may announce. A demon may attack. An enforcer ensures that the command happens. The living world may resist. Families may plead. Priests may recite. Kings may raise guards. But if the Gallu are authorized, the mortal realm has limited power. Their strength does not come from muscle alone. It comes from mandate. This is why their footsteps in the source feel so quiet. A monster that crashes through a wall announces weakness as much as power. It needs force. The Gallu do not need noise. They are already allowed. Picture a Mesopotamian house at night. The roof is flat. The walls are mud, brick. A lamp burns low in a niche. A child sleeps near a woven mat. A jar of water stands by the doorway. Beneath the threshold, perhaps, there is a little protective object, an amulet buried when the house was built. Someone placed it there with care, because in that world, a doorway was never just a doorway. It was a line between inside and outside, family and street, safety and everything else. The room is still. Then the air cools. Not winter cold. Not wind. A more focused cold, like the warmth has been quietly removed from one corner. The lamp does not go out. That would be too theatrical. It only leans. The flame narrows. A shadow near the wall grows a little more solid. No growl. No scream. Only a presence that does not seem to be choosing whether to enter. It has already entered. When the Gallu appear in the source, their presence is often tied to notification. Their visibility itself tells the living that underworld jurisdiction is being exercised. That idea is powerful. To be seen by the Gallu is to learn that an invisible process has become visible for a moment, not so that humans may negotiate, but so they may understand what is happening. They are the warrant and the officer together. The clay tablet becomes heavy in the mind. A scribe presses signs into wet clay. He does not write a campfire tale to scare children into sleep, though I suspect children in Mesopotamia did not need much help being scared. He records a being whose place in the universe is specific. The Gallu carry off. The Gallu enforce. The Gallu serve the underworld and the Anunnaki order. The Gallu make sure the boundary holds. That boundary was essential. Life and death cannot be allowed to mix without consequence. The dead who are not properly settled may trouble the living. The living who trespass into death may disturb the underworld. Those who try to escape the appointed end may distort the cosmic balance. So the system requires agents who can move where others cannot, who can identify the correct soul, and who can act without pity, hatred, pride, or delay. Impersonal force is not the same as evil. This is a point the source returns to again and again. The Gallu are frightening, but they are not evil in the simple sense. They are not rebels against the gods. They are not destroyers of order. They are order in its most severe form. They serve the larger structure of the cosmos, even when their actions appear cruel from a human point of view. And of course they appear cruel. Every family wants one more day. Every lover wants an exception. Every king thinks law is something that should apply with slightly more enthusiasm to other people. But the Gallu do not care for rank. They do not care for charm. They do not care for the softness of a familiar voice. If the underworld court has marked a soul, the Gallu carry out the marking. The source also gestures toward linguistic connections beyond Mesopotamia, such as related ideas of uncovering, revealing, and stripping away veils between life and death. We should handle those broad comparisons carefully. Ancient language families and religious transmissions are complex, and one root does not prove one shared doctrine. But as a poetic idea, it works. The Gallu reveal what living people prefer to keep hidden. That life is temporary. That status is conditional. That every house has a door leading eventually downward. That no amount of lamplight makes the threshold permanent. In a sleep story, we soften the fear, but we do not erase it. The dread becomes slow and clear. The Gallu do not rush. They do not need to. Time itself is on their side. Let the fire beside us breathe once. The word has been spoken. Gallu, a carrier away, a faceless officer, a being whose terror is not appetite, but assignment. Now the story must descend into the place that made them, into Ereshkigal, the great below, where Ereshkigal ruled before Nergal came down with war and plague around him, and where the union of death and violence gave form to the underworld servants who would one day walk silently through the rooms of the living. Ereshkigal is not reached by accident. In the old imagination, the great below lies past the bright noise of the upper world, past grain fields, canals, market voices, temple smoke, and the warm rooms where families sleep near oil lamps. It is beneath the clay that feeds the cities, beneath the roots that touch buried jars, beneath the grave where water offerings sink into darkness. It is the land where life has already become memory. Ereshkigal rules there. Her name is often understood as Queen of the Great Earth, or Lady of the Great Below. She is not a minor shadow at the edge of mythology. She is sovereign. The dead enter her realm, and once they are within it, even gods must take care. Her power is not bright like the noon sun. It is a colder authority, the power of the door after it has shut, the power of the place where every living breath eventually has to be answered. Imagine her court. Do not picture chaos. Picture stillness. The chamber is deep under the earth, where no bird call arrives, where no morning light spills across a threshold. The air is cool and still. The walls seem made not only of stone and packed darkness, but of accumulated endings. Names have passed through this place. Kings, servants, children, soldiers, priests, lovers, merchants who counted silver and learned that silver cannot count for them below. Everyone becomes an arrival here. Ereshkigal sits in that hush. The source describes her with terrible beauty. Bal, remote, wrapped in darkness, crowned by the authority of the dead. Some of that language is poetic and dramatic, and ancient texts themselves can be sparse, where later imagination grows elaborate. We should be honest about that. Yet the emotional truth belongs to the tradition. Ereshkigal is the power that does not need to move quickly. All roads come down to her eventually. Before Nergal, she is already queen. The underworld is already her domain. Then Nergal descends. Nergal is not a gentle figure. He belongs to war. Plague, heat, weapons, and the fierce burning edge of divine violence. In some myths, his path into the underworld begins after an offense involving Ereshkigal messenger, and the story unfolds with tension, confrontation, and in later versions, a union between the warrior god and the queen below. The source frames their meeting not as romance, but as a cosmic collision. That is the right tone for this story. Death meets war. Stillness meets force. The court of endings meets the god of sudden ruin. Picture Nergal entering Irkalla. Bronze armor. The smell of heat still clinging to him, though no sunlight reaches the chamber. Weapons at his side. He has the atmosphere of battle, not because he is swinging blades in every direction like an overexcited actor, but because violence follows him the way smoke follows a fire. Even when he stands still, the room knows what he has done. Ereshkigal does not yield like a frightened mortal. She is the underworld. A conqueror who enters her realm has already stepped into her law. Their meeting is not soft. It is not courtship under flowers. It is the joining of two absolute powers, the inevitability of death and the force that delivers bodies to it in war and plague. The source says that from this union came the Gallu, born not from ordinary flesh, born from the intersection of judgment and violence, born from the place where a life becomes a case. This is mythic language, and it should remain mythic. We cannot treat it as a biological origin, but as theology, it explains the Gallu perfectly. They have Ereshkigal authority over death and transition. They have Nergal relentless movement, martial certainty, and indifference to suffering when duty requires action. They are not children of comfort. They are the offspring of a system that needs agents capable of doing what no tender spirit could do. The source says they emerged fully formed. That detail matters. They did not need training because their purpose was built into them. The law of the underworld was not taught after birth. It opened inside them with their first awareness. They knew boundary, debt, transition, mandate, and seizure. They understood the procedure before anyone gave them a tablet. There is something deeply unsettling in a being that wakes already knowing how to take a soul. Not learning, not choosing, knowing. The Gallu open their ember eyes in the dark, and the underworld already has officers. Their bodies in early description carry the earth itself. Skin like dried clay. Eyes like coals left in a dying fire. Hands shaped for grasping what ordinary hands cannot grasp. The source later gives them many disturbing qualities: facelessness, shadow forms, talon, wrong reflections, movement through walls, and the ability to cross between realms. But at their origin, the simplest image is enough. Clay, ember, silence, purpose. They are placed high in the underworld hierarchy, above common spirits, because they do not act from personal hunger. They act under authority. A restless ghost may be confused. A diseased demon may be driven by harmful impulse. Lamashtu may be feared for her personal malice. But the Gallu are impersonal. They do not want. They execute. That word should feel cold. Execute, not only in the sense of killing, but in the older bureaucratic sense. To carry out. To make the order real. A command that remains on clay is only text. The Gallu turn text into event. The source compares them to the Utuku, who can represent spirits of the restless dead in certain traditions. The Utuku may emerge from improper transition. They may trouble the living because something has gone wrong. Their danger can be unpredictable. They belong to the disorder created when death is not settled. The Gallu are the opposite. They are the settlement. They come to prevent disorder, even if their arrival feels like disaster to those who love the person being taken. The source also contrasts them with Lamashtu. Her terror is personal. She attacks pregnant women and infants. She has appetite, cruelty, and a recognizable demonic psychology. Ancient families feared her because her danger entered the most vulnerable spaces of the house. The bed, the cradle, the body before birth. The Gallu are not like that. They do not sneak in because they envy a child. They do not choose a house because joy inside it angers them. They arrive when underworld law touches the mortal realm. This distinction is the foundation of the whole story. The Gallu are not evil disorder. They are severe order. They are frightening because they prove that the cosmos does not always define justice as mercy. In human life, mercy is often the thing we want most from law. One exception, one delay, one softer reading, one more day. But the Gallu serve a system that sees balance before tenderness. If a person has crossed into forbidden necromancy, if mourning duties have failed, if an underworld exchange requires a substitute, if a divine mandate has named someone, the Gallu are not there to feel conflicted about it. That is why they are so quiet. The loudest demons often need attention. The Gallu do not. The underworld itself gives them weight. Each one, the source says, could hold responsibility over specific categories of death and transition. Some associated with natural deaths, some with violent deaths, some with deaths under strange or supernatural circumstances. This specialization reflects a Mesopotamian habit of organizing even invisible processes into offices. Death is not a single, undifferentiated event. It has kinds. Each kind may require its own handling. A person who dies in old age at home is not the same legal case as one who dies in war. A neglected corpse is not the same as a properly buried ancestor. A sorcerer who tries to cheat the boundary is not the same as a child carried away by fever. The underworld must know the difference. The Gallu know the difference. Imagine an underworld chamber where assignments are made. A cold tablet lies on a table. A name is written, or perhaps something like a name, an identity recognized beyond speech. A scribe of the dead records the circumstance. Ereshkigal authority stands behind the judgment. Nergal severity gives force to the action. A Gallu steps forward, not as a volunteer, not as a hero, but as the correct instrument There is no excitement, only dispatch. Then it ascends. This ascent into the mortal world is one of the source's strongest images. The newly formed Gallu do not invade the upper realm as rebels from below. They come as appointed officials. Their presence in the living world is part of the machinery that keeps cosmic order intact. If death never reaches up, life becomes lawless. If the living can block the dead from receiving their due, the underworld becomes unstable. If the dead can wander without recall, the household becomes unsafe. The boundary needs guardians on both sides. The Gallu are those guardians when the boundary must take action. If you were standing in a Mesopotamian street at dusk, you would not necessarily see them. Most evenings would pass with ordinary fear and ordinary supper. A donkey complaining. A pot placed near coals. Someone sweeping dust from a threshold with the resigned patience of a person who knows the dust will win. Children quarreling in a courtyard. A priest hurrying because priests have also been late since the beginning of organized religion. But if a Gallu had been sent, the street might change. The air would sharpen. Dogs might lower their heads. A lamp might lean though no wind entered. A person near the doorway might feel watched before anything appeared. Then a shape would be there. In the old fear, it does not need to announce its purpose. Its presence is the announcement. This is how divine bureaucracy becomes horror. Not by becoming messy, but by becoming perfect. The Gallu carry the underworld into a room with them. They are fragments of Irkalla walking above ground. They bring Ereshkigal certainty and Nergal force. They bring the sense that somewhere below, a case has already been reviewed, and the living are late to the knowledge. That delay is part of the terror. Mortals discover the verdict only when enforcement has begun. The source later discusses formal relationships with the Anunnaki, divine complaints, legal requests, and underworld courts. That will come soon. For now, the origin gives the emotional logic. Beings born of death and war become the officers of transition. Their neutrality is not weakness. It is purity of function. They do not comfort, because comfort is not their office. They do not punish for pleasure, because pleasure is not their office. They carry off, because carrying off is their office. In the firelit room, let that settle as gently as such a thought can settle. The Gallu are terrifying because they remove drama from death. They make death administrative. A name called. A warrant sealed. A passage enforced. A boundary restored. Ereshkigal remains below on her throne. Nergal stands near the war heat of the dead. Between them, the Gallu move outward, faceless in purpose even before we reach their faceless bodies. The underworld has its agents now, and the Anunnaki, looking over the widening world of mortals, begin to understand how useful such agents will be when kings, priests, sorcerers, and grieving families try to bend the laws that hold life and death apart. The Anunnaki needed agents who could make a verdict move. A divine court without enforcement is only a room full of serious voices. A tablet without a messenger is only clay. A judgment that cannot reach the living world is a shadow sitting in darkness. In the Mesopotamian imagination described by the source, the underworld was not a vague emptiness beneath the ground. It was a jurisdiction, a realm with rulers, records, gates, officials, duties, claims, and consequences. The Gallu belonged to that structure. They were not wandering accidents. They were sent. To understand their fear, picture the divine order as a great layered administration. Above are the high gods, Anu in the sky, Enlil with command and storm, Enki with wisdom and the deep waters, Inanna with desire and battle, Nergal with plague and war, Ereshkigal with the great below. Around them are lesser gods, divine attendants, scribes, gatekeepers, protective spirits, messengers, and the dead themselves, all moving within an order that ancient people imagined as older than any human king. The Anunnaki are not merely a crowd of gods in this telling. They are a governing assembly. That matters. A government does not only announce ideals. It keeps records. It receives complaints. It decides jurisdiction. It appoints officers. It defines what belongs where. The source frames the Gallu as one of the most severe enforcement arms of that sacred structure, especially where the living world and the dead world touch in dangerous ways. Imagine a court below the earth. No sun enters it. No reed mat softens the floor. The air is cold and still, the kind of stillness that seems to have forgotten wind. Tablets are stacked in shadow. Names are known there, not only the names spoken by mothers and friends, but the deeper names that identify a life when the body has returned to clay. A scribe sits near the edge of darkness. He does not hurry. The dead have time. A complaint arrives. Perhaps it comes from Ereshkigal herself. Perhaps from Nergal. Perhaps from another deity whose order has been disturbed. Perhaps from a ghost left unsettled by improper rites. Perhaps from the consequences of a living person trying to reach into death with forbidden force. The complaint is not a cry in the modern sense. It is a case, a condition that violates balance. A mortal has tried to evade death by magic. A family has failed the rites of the dead. A sorcerer has forced open a gate that should have stayed closed. A king has broken an oath made before the gods. A priest has called the dead without proper authority. A goddess has entered the underworld and must give a substitute before she leaves. In such cases, the Gallu become necessary. This is where the horror becomes legal rather than chaotic. The question is not whether a demon is angry. The question is whether the order has been breached. If it has, then the underworld court may issue a mandate, and once that mandate exists, the Gallu act with a kind of immunity that ordinary magic cannot simply break. The source describes this as divine authority, not personal strength. A human guard can be stopped by a stronger guard. A wild spirit can be driven away by a powerful ritual. A demon acting unlawfully can be cursed, bound, burned in a figurine, or sent back through proper names. But what if the being at the doorway is not breaking the law? What if the being is the law? That is the Gallu problem. You cannot easily exercise a verdict. You cannot strike a warrant with a stick and call it victory. Honestly, this is what makes them feel so different from ordinary monsters. A monster in a story can be tricked. A beast can be trapped. A ghost can sometimes be soothed with food and memory. But the Gallu arrive with the cold calm of a clerk and the hands of the underworld. That combination is far more unsettling than teeth alone. Their dispatch would follow purpose. The source suggests that different Gallu could be linked to different kinds of death and transition. Some may have enforced natural death, where the appointed span had ended. Some may have moved around violent death, where Nergal's shadow was strong. Some may have pursued those who escaped obligations to the dead. Some may have taken those whose unusual circumstances required special handling. This kind of specialization fits the Mesopotamian habit of classifying the unseen world with great seriousness. A death at home, a death in war, a death after ritual pollution, a death caused by neglected ghosts, a death that follows divine offense. These are not all the same case. The underworld knows the difference. The Gallu know the difference. There is a strange comfort hidden inside that fear. Not much comfort, perhaps, but some. If death has categories, then it was not random. If death has officials, then it is not only chaos, but the comfort is thin, because the official may still be coming for someone loved. Now, imagine the upper world. A palace in late evening. The courtyard smells of warm stone, oil, sweat, cedar smoke, and old wealth. Musicians have gone quiet. A king sits with advisors near a wall painted in deep color. Bronze lamps throw yellow light over their hands. Outside, guards stand in rows, spears upright, faces still. They know how to stop thieves. They know how to stop rival soldiers. They do not know how to stop the underworld. A priest enters, pale from bad news. A dream has been read. An omen has been confirmed. A dead king has appeared in sleep. A ritual was done wrongly. A vow was broken. The old clay tablet in the temple gives a warning. The room grows cooler, and everyone notices at once, though nobody wants to be first to say it. Then the Gallu appears at the threshold. Not with noise, not by breaking the door. It is simply there, as if the shadow of the doorway has remembered a body. The guards lower their spears, but not because they choose respect. Their arms understand before their minds do. A bronze point may threaten a man. It may threaten a thief. It may threaten a rival from another city. It cannot threaten a lawful passage from Ereshkigal, the king, who can command fields, soldiers, granadiers, scribes, singers, builders, and punishments, cannot command this. That scene is central to the source view. Mortal authority ends where underworld authority begins. Even kings stand inside the larger administration. Their crowns do not cancel the laws below. Their guards do not impress the dead. The Gallu do not ask permission. They identify. That word is almost worse than seize. Identification is kiet. It means the target is known. The right soul has been matched to the mandate. No anger is required. no persuasion. The entire scene is a process reaching its correct line. This is why they are not psychopomps in the gentle sense. Many cultures imagine guides of the dead, figures who lead souls, comfort them, escort them across rivers, open paths, or explain what happens next. The Gallu may accompany passage, but comfort is not their office. They are not there to make the soul feel ready. They are there because readiness no longer matters. A guide walks with you. A Gallu takes you. The distinction is severe. The source also emphasizes that gods themselves must be careful. The Gallu operate under legal authorization. Once so, they are not easily overruled by emotional pleas, personal rank, or ordinary divine preference. This is crucial for understanding the descent of Inanna, where even one of the most powerful goddesses in Mesopotamian religion cannot simply dismiss the Gallu once the underworld law has attached itself to her release. The Gallu are therefore terrifying to gods as well as humans, not because they outrank all gods, because their mandate belongs to a law that even gods must respect under certain conditions. In a well-ordered cosmos, authority is not a single ladder. It is jurisdiction. Inanna may be supreme in love, war, desire, kingship, and celestial brilliance. But in the underworld, Ereshkigal law holds. A river god rules water. A city god rules a city. A gatekeeper rules the gate at the moment of crossing. The Gallu rule the act of carrying off when they have been assigned. That is ancient legal imagination at work. And it is very Mesopotamian. This was a civilization that understood boundaries. Field boundaries, canal boundaries, temple boundaries, household thresholds, city walls, contracts, oaths, inheritance lines, burial obligations, debt, ratio, status, offices. If the visible world is full of boundaries that must be recorded and protected, then the invisible world will be imagined with boundaries too. The Gallu are boundary enforcement in living form. This also explains why protective magic against them becomes so difficult later in the source. You cannot simply burn a figurine and declare victory if the underworld itself has approved the mission. You must misdirect, conceal, delay, appeal, purify, reveal false forms, reinforce thresholds, protect the household, work around the mandate, if possible, rather than attack the authority head-on. The Ashipu priest, the ritual expert, will become important for that reason. But before household protections and mirrors and smoke, the structure must be understood. A complaint is filed. A case is reviewed. A mandate is sealed. An officer is dispatched. A soul is identified. A boundary is restored. That is the Gallu sequence in its coldest form. Now the fire beside us folds softly inward. The candle gives a small tremble. In the story, the underworld court remains open because the dead never stop arriving. Tablets lie in shadow. Names are read. Some complaints are dismissed. Some are accepted. Some require no Gallu. Some require immediate dispatch. This impartiality is part of the dread. The Gallu do not care whether the target is rich or poor. They do not care whether the family will weep. They do not care whether the person had plans in the morning. They do not care whether the house is beautiful, whether the bed is warm, whether the lamp has only just been filled. They care only for the order that sent them. A world with such beings is frightening, but also deeply coherent. The Mesopotamians did not imagine death as a whole without structure. They imagined a system so firm that it could send officers into the upper world and make kings step aside. And now, with that law in mind, we can enter the myth that shows the Gallu most clearly. A goddess descends through 7 gates. Her crown is removed. Her jewels are removed. Her power is stripped until the underworld can hold her. Shedim returns and finds that no one leaves the great below without balance. The Gallu walk beside Inanna into the light, faceless, patient, authorized, searching not for prey, but for a substitute. The Gallu walk beside Inanna into the light. That image is quieter than a battle and colder than a curse. The goddess has returned from the place where no living body should stand. She has crossed the 7 gates. She has lost her crown, her beads, her measuring rod, her royal garment, the visible powers that marked her in the upper world. She has been held by Ereshkigal. She has been judged by the underworld. Through divine intervention, she is released. But release is not freedom. That is the law of the story. Inanna cannot simply walk away from Ereshkigal as if the underworld were a room she visited and found unpleasant. She entered the realm of the dead, and the realm of the dead has rules. If she is to return to the world above, someone must take her place. Balance must be restored. The underworld cannot be cheated, not by beauty, not by rank, not by tears, not even by a goddess whose name shakes cities. So the Gallu go with her. The source treats this as the central mythic case for their function. They are not random demons clinging to Inanna in spite. They are legal escorts. They accompany her because her release is conditional. They must identify the substitute required by underworld law. Picture the ascent. The air changes slowly. The deep silence thins. The upper world begins as a memory of warmth, then a breath of it, then a pale suggestion of light. Inanna steps upward from the great below, but she is not alone. Behind her and around her move the Gallu, not celebrating, not speaking, not marveling at the living world. They have no reason to marvel. They are on assignment. Their forms are difficult to hold with the eye. Faceless, in the later, frightening imagination. Clay shadow bodies. Ember eyes. Still hands. The source says they are beings who can seize flesh and soul alike. But in this myth, their most frightening feature is not appearance. It is their judgment. They look for suitability, not guilt in the simple human sense. Suitability. That word is terrible. The substitute must fit the law. Inanna first comes upon Ninshubur, her loyal attendant. Ninshubur has mourned. She has dressed in grief. She has pleaded for Inanna release. She has gone to the gods in desperate loyalty, asking for help. When the Gallu see her, they do not seize her, not because they are moved by pity, not because her tears soften them, because she is not legally suitable. She has honored the loss. She has fulfilled the emotional and ritual obligations of loyalty. The Gallu move on. This is important. They are not simply taking the first soul available. They are not wild. They are precise. Mourning changes the case. Conduct matters. The cosmic legal status of a person can be shaped by grief properly shown. Inanna then reaches Shara, sometimes described as her son or beloved, dependent in the tradition. He too is in mourning, sitting in dust, dressed in sorrow. The Gallu ask for him, or identify him as a possible substitute, depending on how the sequence is told. Inanna refuses, and his mourning conduct matters. He is spared. Again, the pattern holds. Then Lula, another loyal figure, is encountered. He also shows grief. He also is spared. The Gallu are patient. They do not complain. They do not become frustrated because the first options fail. They continue the search. This is the procedural terror of the myth. A chaotic demon would lash out by now. A hungry spirit would take what it could. The Gallu do neither. The substitute must be correct, or the process is not complete. The upper world, meanwhile, is not quiet by. Life has continued. People have eaten, moved, traded, slept, loved, quarreled, counted grain, complained about neighbors, and done all the unglamorous things that make civilization possible. Inanna returns from death into this ordinary movement. But death has followed her. She has brought the underworld into daylight. Then she reaches Dumuzi. Dumuzi, her husband or consort in many versions, the shepherd king, the beautiful one associated with fertility, flocks, growth, and seasonal life. He is not sitting in dust. He is not dressed in mourning. He has not lowered himself in grief. In some traditions, he sits splendidly on a throne or fine seat, enjoying power in her absence. The moment is sharp. Inanna says him. The Gallu see him. The law sees him. Dumuzi has failed in the social and ritual language of mourning. He did not honor her descent. He did not show grief when the goddess was gone. His visible comfort makes him vulnerable. This is not only a marital quarrel, it is legal exposure. The Gallu identify him as the substitute. No thunder is needed. No dramatic speech is needed. Recognition is enough. Imagine Dumuzi in that instant. The room warm, the seat comfortable, the signs of status around him. Perhaps he hears the change before he understands it. A shift in air, a cooling near the wall, a silence from attendants who suddenly do not know where to look. Inanna's face hardens. Behind her, the Gallu turn their faceless attention toward him. A person can become doomed before standing up. The source stresses that once the process has found its lawful target, even Inanna cannot simply countermand it. That is a crucial detail. She may rage. She may direct. She may regret. But the Gallu are not merely her personal servants. They accompany her under the terms of Underworld release. The mandate is larger than her feeling. This is why the myth is so unsettling. Inanna is powerful, but the law she triggered is more powerful in its own domain. Dumuzi flees. The flight is one of the oldest human gestures in the face of a verdict. Run first. Understand Lotter. His feet leave the place of comfort. He moves across landscapes, through fields, open ground, perhaps toward family, toward help, toward any place not already touched by the underworld shadow. Dust rises behind him. Breath shortens. The world that was familiar becomes a maze of possible hiding places. But the Gallu follow. They are not hunters in the animal sense. They do not need smell or rage. They follow because the target has been marked. Distance is a mortal hope. Authorization is an underworld fact. That difference defines the chase. Dumuzi may hide among reeds, houses, fields, or relatives. He may be transformed in some versions. He may be aided by his sister Geshtinana, whose devotion becomes a counterweight to his failure. The tradition has variations, and later versions develop the seasonal sharing of time between Dumuzi and Geshtinana in the underworld. But the central source point remains. The Gallu pursue the substitute until the underworld receives its due. Their conduct is terrible, but not random. The myth reveals how emotion, ritual, and law intersect in Mesopotamian thought. Mourning is not only feeling, it is evidence. Loyalty is not only private affection, it has cosmic value. To fail to mourn properly is not only rude, it can expose a person to the claims of death. This may feel harsh to us. It is harsh, but it also shows a society in which grief had structure. The dead had to be honored. Absence had to be marked. If a person vanished into the underworld and the household simply continued in comfort, the moral order was wrong. Dumuzi's failure is not a small domestic insult. It signals that he did not recognize the gravity of Inanna passage. The Gallu correct that imbalance. Again, they do not do it kindly, but kindness is not their role. The source emphasizes that they do not show personal malice. They do not hate Dumuzi. They are not jealous of his beauty, power, or comfort. They are not angry husbands, rivaugots, or hungry ghosts. They are legal instruments. His emotional failure makes him a valid substitute, and they act accordingly. There is a strange horror in being taken for a technical reason, not because the universe despises you, because the rule applies. Many ancient listeners may have understood that horror immediately. Their world was full of rituals whose failure could bring consequences. A missed offering, a broken oath, a neglected grave, a wrongly spoken formula, a polluted threshold. The visible act might seem small, but the unseen order could treat it as serious. Dumuzi learns that too late. The Gallu are the too late. This part of the myth also makes their authority visible. They can move with Inanna herself. They can test potential substitutes. They can spare those who do not fit. They can seize the one who does. They can continue the pursuit even through divine and royal relationships. Their office is clear. If we soften the scene for night listening, we can feel its sadness more than its violence. Dumuzi was a figure of life, flock, field, and seasonal renewal. To be taken by Gallu is not only punishment. It becomes part of a cycle of absence and return, growth and withering, fertility and barrenness. His descent helps explain why life disappears into the earth and later comes back. In that sense, the Gallu do not only enforce death, they help maintain the rhythm between worlds. But from the inside of the chase, rhythm is cold comfort. A man runs. The underworld follows. His sister weeps. A goddess who returned from death has brought death with her. The living world learns that no boundary crossing is free. The source uses this myth to show how the Gallu are different from ordinary demons. They are not attracted by weakness. They are summoned by structure. They do not create the need for a substitute. They enforce it. They do not choose Dumuzi because they prefer him. They recognize the legal conditions already formed around him. This is the deepest terror of the descent of Inanna. Death has rules, and the rules continue even after rescue. A modern story might let the goddess escape and close the door behind her. The Mesopotamian story does not. It knows that every door has hinges on both sides. If something leaves the underworld, something must answer for that absence. Balance is not mercy. Balance is balance. Now imagine the final view of Dumuzi before the tradition carries him into later developments. He is no longer lounging in comfort. He is moving through dust. The fine seat is behind him. The flocks, the fields, the warm spaces of the living are slipping away. Somewhere near him or behind him are the Gallu, patient as law, faceless as consequence. They are not hurried. That may be the most frightening part. The living run because time is short. The Gallu walk because time belongs to them. In the firelit room, let that image pass slowly. Inanna has returned, but the underworld has not been cheated. Ninshubu mourned and was spared. Shera mourned and was spared. Lulal mourned and was spared. Dumuzi failed to mourn and was marked. The Gallu did not decide from appetite. They followed the shape of the law. The myth becomes a lesson in grief, authority, and cosmic reciprocity. Do not enter death lightly. Do not ignore the dead. Do not assume power frees you from procedure. Do not mistake silence for absence. Because somewhere below the earth, Ereshkigal court remembers. And when remembrance becomes mandate, the Gallu can rise. The chase of Dumuzi fades now into the darker question of what such beings looked like when humans imagined them entering a room. Faceless shadows, clay-colored bodies, ember eyes, talons that grasp what ordinary hands cannot hold, reflections that arrive wrong in polished bronze, cold places left behind after they pass. Dumuzi runs through the old landscape. The Gallu follow, and in the next layer of fear, the living begin to wonder how they would recognize one before it had already recognized them. What would it mean to recognize something with no face? That question waits behind the story of Dumuzi. The Gallu have already shown what they do. They walk beside Inanna. They inspect mourners. They spare the ones who do not fit. They turn toward the one whose conduct has made him vulnerable. But after the legal fear comes another kind of fear, the fear of appearance. The source describes the Gallu not as creatures with one neat body, but as beings whose form itself feels like a violation of ordinary seeing. Their natural shape is often imagined as a faceless shadow, a humanoid emptiness, a body where identity should have gathered but did not. They may have limbs. They may stand upright. They may move through a doorway with the proportion of a person. Yet where a face should be, where the eyes and mouth should tell the living mind how to respond, there is only absence. Not a mask, not a veil. Absence. Humans search for faces almost before we know we are searching. We read faces for danger, pity, anger, recognition, hesitation, weakness, umur. A face tells us whether a being is about to speak, whether it sees us, whether it understands us, whether it might be persuaded. A faceless Gallu removes that hope. You cannot appeal to an expression that is not there. Imagine a chamber in an old Mesopotamian house. The night is warm outside, but inside one corner has gone cold. A clay lamp burns low. The flame is small and yellow. The wall is made of mud brick, with cracks like dry riverbeds. A woven mat lies near the floor. Someone wakes before knowing why, because the body often hears dread before the mind names it. A figure stands near the doorway. The first impression is human, or nearly human. Height, shoulders, arms, stillness. But the longer the eye stays, the less human it becomes. The skin, if skin is the right word, is the color of dried clay after rain has left it. The outline drinks the light. The head turns slightly, and there is no face to turn with it. Only a place where a face has been denied. The source gives them ember-like eyes in some descriptions, small points of fire inside shadow or clay. That seems contradictory at first, faceless and ember-eyed. But ancient fear often works this way. The form is unstable. Sometimes the face is blank. Sometimes two coals open in it. Sometimes the eyes appear without the rest of the personhood that would make them bearable. Eyes without a face do not comfort. They only identify. That word returns. Identify. The Gallu do not look because they are curious. They look because looking is part of recognition. The target is matched. The law has found its body. Their hands are described as taloned, but we should keep the image quiet. These talons are not for noisy horror. They are for grasping what ordinary hands cannot hold. Body and soul. Breath and identity. The outer person and the inner remainder. In Mesopotamian thought, death is not simply a cut line between flesh and nothing. It is transition, separation, registration, relocation. A being tasked with carrying off must be able to hold the part that slips away from ordinary touch. So the talons are metaphysical tools. That may be worse than claws. A claw wounds the flesh. A Gallu hand can take the person. The source also describes their footsteps as silent, yet capable of leaving marks in stone or dust. Again, the contradiction is the point. They do not need sound to announce weight. Their presence may not disturb the air, but the world remembers where they have stood. A line of shallow impressions across a threshold. Dust drawn inward. A stone darker where the foot rested. Evidence without noise. In a culture of thresholds, such marks matter. The doorway is never just architecture. It is a boundary. If a Gallu footprint appears near the threshold, the household knows that the boundary has been crossed by something no bolt could stop. Their movement is wrong in another way. They can pass through sealed rooms, walls, and defensive spaces. Palaces, bunkers, locked storage rooms, priestly chambers, the bedchambers with guards outside. Human architecture works against human bodies. It works against thieves, soldiers, animals, heat, cold, rain, dust. It does not work against an authorized underworld agent whose jurisdiction is not blocked by brick. A king may surround himself with walls. A Gallu passes through the idea of wall. Picture a royal sleeping chamber. Thick walls, curtains, bronze fittings, guards beyond the door, charms hidden under the threshold, a lamp burning in perfumed oil. The king has paid men to watch every passage, and for mortal danger, that may be enough. Then the air shimmers near the inner wall. Not a door, not a crack. A soft distortion, like heat over stone, except the room has grown colder. The wall darkens from within. A shape steps out, or seems to remember that it had always been there. The guards outside hear nothing. Their spears remain upright. Their king is no longer alone. This is the authority of the Gallu made visible. Their incorporeality is not mere ghostliness. It is legal penetration. If the mandate exists, sealed space loses meaning. The source also gives them shape-shifting powers. They may wear the faces of the living. That phrase is chilling because it turns the safety of familiarity against the household. A Gallu might appear as a relative, a servant, a friend, someone already expected at the door. The face is borrowed, but the essence underneath remains shadow. This is where mirrors enter the tradition. Polished bronze mirrors were not only objects of vanity, they could become diagnostic tools in protective practice. A false form might hold before human eyes, but fail in reflection. The person at the door smiles. The mirror shows delay, or the face in the mirror does not match the body, or the reflection is slightly turned when the visitor is still, or there is no proper reflection at all, only a stain in bronze light. Imagine a merchant household at dusk. Someone knocks. A familiar voice gives a name. The servant almost opens, but the grandmother, who has survived enough years to trust caution more than politeness, lifts a bronze mirror from its hook. She angles it toward the doorway. The lamplight slides across polished metal. In it, the visitor face appears one breath late. Not much. Enough. The room goes silent. That is the kind of fear that belongs to the Gallu. Not the obvious monster outside the door, but the familiar shape that fails a small test. Their shape-shifting also explains why direct perception cannot be trusted during supernatural crisis. Ancient households used amulets, mirrors, incantation, and priestly diagnosis because the senses alone could be deceived. A Gallu might wear a human face, but smoke, light, bronze, or sacred speech could reveal the borrowed surface. The source describes their manifestations as changes in atmosphere. The room cools. Life, warmth drains. Plants wither. Animals refuse to enter. Oil flames lean or gutter. A feeling of melancholy settles after departure, as if the house itself remembers being touched by the underworld. This melancholy is important. Not all fear is sharp. Some fear is a weight. After a Gallu leaves, the room may remain intact. The mat still lies on the floor. The jar still holds water. The lamp still burns. But everyone who enters feels something has been removed. The air is thinner. The walls seem older. The house has been made aware of death. The source also gives them the ability to pursue across distance and dimension once assigned. Dumuzi fleeing shows this in mythic form. A target can run over land, through reeds, toward relatives, into hiding. But distance is a human strategy. The Gallu follow assignment, not tracks alone. A hunter can lose a footprint. A Gallu does not lose a mandate. This is why their pursuit feels calm. They do not need speed in the ordinary sense. They can be sudden, yes, but they are not anxious. They do not worry that the target may escape if they pause. The underworld law binds the path more tightly than rope. Enkidu dream in the Epic of Gilgamesh gives another psychological echo of this terror. Enkidu dreams of a being from the underworld, terrible in appearance, seizing him and dragging him toward the house of dust. The exact figure is not always called Gallu in every reading, but the emotional field is close to the source theme. A powerful man, friend of a king, hunter, warrior, becomes helpless before an agent of death. What matters is the dream feeling, being watched by fate before the waking world admits it. Imagine Enkidu waking. The fire has burned low. Gilgamesh is near. The night around them is not different, yet everything has changed because the dream has opened a window. Enkidu remembers the face, or the lack of one. He remembers a grip that did not need cruelty to be final. He remembers dust, darkness, a house where those who enter do not return as they were. The dream tells him that death has already turned toward him. The source makes much of their facelessness as negation of identity. In Mesopotamian thought, faces matter. Names matter. Presentation matters. To have a face is to be socially and ritually readable. A faceless being resists relationship. It cannot be shamed. It cannot be charmed by beauty. It cannot be softened by seeing tears in the way another person might. No smile, no pity, no anger to cool, no pride to flatter, only function. The ember eyes, when present, are not windows into personality. They are marks of attention. Two small fires in the dark, like coals left after a judgment has burned away everything unnecessary. The clay-colored skin also matters. Clay is the substance of human bodies in Mesopotamian creation thought. Clay is tablet. Clay is brick. Clay is grave. Clay is the material into which names are pressed and from which cities are built. A Gallu with clay-colored skin seems to stand between document, body, and earth. It is as if the underworld has shaped an officer from the same matter that holds contracts and corpses. Even the demon looks administrative. The source describes cold spots, withering plants, wrong reflections, silent footprints, talung, walls losing meaning, and a sense of life, warmth being depleted. These are sensory ways of saying one thing. The Gallu carry the environment of your kala into the living world. Wherever they appear, the upper world begins to behave like the edge of the underworld. Warmth withdraws. Reflection fails. Barriers open. Plants weaken. Sound thins. The household becomes a little less alive. And yet, this dread must remain soft in our telling. The Gallu are not creatures to shout about. Their fear is the hush before a name is called. So imagine one final night scene. A scribe sits late, copying an incantation tablet. His stylus has made his fingers ache. The lamp is low. Outside, the street is nearly empty. He writes signs concerning demons, sickness, dreams, and underworld agents. He knows the categories. He knows the names. Perhaps he believes that knowing them gives some protection. Then the room cools. He stops writing. The wet clay tablet waits under his hand. In polished bronze beside him, the reflection of the door is wrong. Only slightly. That is enough. The source now moves from terror to response, because Mesopotamian culture did not leave households helpless. If the Gallu could pass through walls, people buried amulets under thresholds. If they wore faces, people used mirrors. If direct magic could not defeat lawful authority, priests used concealment, smoke, purification, misdirection, and appeal. The Gallu brought the fear of underworld law into the house. The living answered by turning the house itself into a guarded boundary. The living answered by turning the house itself into a guarded boundary. That is the next layer of the Gallu story. Fear did not remain only fear. Mesopotamian people built answers for it. Careful answers, practical answers, answers made of clay, bronze, smoke, salt, cheddar, words, thresholds, and trained hands. The first problem was severe. You cannot simply attack a Gallu if it has been sent under lawful authority. That is the source central point about protection. A restless ghost might be soothed. A malicious demon might be driven away. A sickness spirit might be named and expelled. But an authorized Gallu is not merely trespassing. It comes with the underworld behind it. Direct magical assault may fail because the being is not violating the cosmic order. It is carrying out that order. So defense becomes subtle. Not always destroy. Conceal. Misdirect. Purify. Delay. Appeal. Reveal. Strengthen the threshold. Make the target hard to identify. This is very different from the idea of a hero defeating a demon with one brave shout. In the world of the Gallu, the household must become clever. If the officer has a warrant, one does not simply punch the officer, especially if the officer can pass through walls and has ember eyes. One files an appeal, hides the defendant, locks the records, burns the wrong address, and hopes the underworld clerk is briefly annoyed. That little thought is almost funny. Almost. Ancient ritual is often serious because it knows fear has to be managed step by step. Begin at the doorway. A Mesopotamian house was not only a shelter from heat and thieves. It was a small ritual territory. The threshold mattered because it marked the crossing between street and family, outside and inside, danger and protection. Beneath thresholds, people could place protective deposits, little objects, figurines, amulets, inscribed pieces, things meant to guard the boundary before the house ever filled with daily noise. Imagine a family building a house. The walls are still raw. The floor is packed earth. The doorway has not yet been worn smooth by years of feet. A ritual specialist kneels near the threshold. Beside him are small objects, perhaps clay figurines, stones, charms, tiny written signs, substances chosen not for beauty alone, but for protective force. The family watches quietly. A child fidgets and is pulled back by the wrist. The amulet is placed under the threshold. Earth covers it. The house now has a hidden sentence beneath its first step. Every person who enters will pass above the charm. Every dangerous thing that tries to cross must meet it. It is not a wall in the ordinary sense. It is a statement. This space has guardians. This household is named. This doorway has been noticed by the gods. The source describes amulets worn on the body as well. A small object at the neck. A charm sewn into clothing. A seal cylinder or inscribed token held close to the skin. The body becomes its own threshold, because the soul may need defense not only at the doorway of the house, but at the doorway of sleep, sickness, dream, and fear. Bronze mirrors offered another defense. If a Gallu could wear the face of the living, then the borrowed face had to be tested. A polished mirror could reveal wrongness. The source mentions formulas meant to make the borrowed face fall away before the light of Shamash, the sun god and divine judge. This makes perfect sense inside Mesopotamian theology. Shamash sees. Shamash judges. Shamash illuminates hidden truth. A mirror in his light becomes more than metal. Picture an Ashipu priest holding polished bronze before a suspected visitor. The room is dim. The lamp is steady. The priest does not shout. He angles the mirror carefully, catching lamplight and perhaps dawnlight at the same time. The person standing in the doorway smiles as expected. The mirror does not agree. There is a pause. The kind of pause that makes everyone present suddenly aware of their own breathing. Then the incantation begins. Words are not decoration here. Words are tools. A correctly spoken formula can align a human action with divine authority. It can name the hidden thing. It can call on Shamash to reveal. It can ask protective gods to stand at the threshold. In a world where the wrong being may wear a familiar face, naming becomes survival. Smoke is another protection. The source describes rituals using aromatic woods and smoke barriers, including traditions associated with Maqlû and broader anti-demonic practice. Maqlû, meaning burning, is a famous Mesopotamian anti-witchcraft ritual series, focused especially on countering sorcery, destructive magic, and hostile forces through images, fire, spoken formulas, and ritual reversal. The Gallu question is not identical to every Maqlû context, but the source uses such ritual technologies to show how Mesopotamians worked against dangerous supernatural pressure. Fire consumes a substitute. Smoke hides, purifies, and marks a protected space. Imagine 7 kinds of aromatic wood burning in a bowl. Cedar, juniper, tamarisk, sweet reed. Other woods chosen for scent, tradition, and sacred association. The smoke rises in pale folds. It clings to hair and cloth. It enters the corners where ordinary sweeping cannot reach. A priest guides it around the bed, the doorway, the storage room, the roof access, the sleeping mat of the sick person. The smoke is not meant only to smell pleasant. It creates interference, a living veil. If the Gallu tracks by name, heat, breath, or spiritual mark, smoke may blur. If the household has become too visible to underworld attention, smoke may soften the outline. If the house has been touched by pollution, smoke helps reset the space. Again, the logic is not brute force. It is concealment and correction. Shorpu enters the source as another ritual tradition, where Maqlû often addresses witchcraft and hostile magic. Shorpu deals with purification from curse, sin, oath violation, ritual contamination, and unknown offense. That last part matters. Ancient people did not always know what had gone wrong. A person could suffer and wonder which god had been offended, which oath had been broken, which ghost neglected, which impurity acquired. Shorpu answers uncertainty with process. Salt, cedar oil, sacred water, burning, recitation, days of cleansing. The ritual does not need the sufferer to understand everything. It creates a path through not knowing. Picture a room after suspected Gallu contact. The family does not speak loudly. A mat has been removed. A bowl of water waits near the door. Salt is set in a small dish. Cedar oil rests in a sealed vessel. The Ashipu enters, and the work begins from the edges inward. Threshold first. Corners next. Sleeping place. Hearth. Vatarjar. Body of the afflicted person. Salt touches the skin. Cedar oil shines briefly in lamplight. Water is sprinkled or poured in controlled motion. Words are spoken in a low rhythm. The ritual gives fear a shape. This is one of the most important functions of such practices. Even if we read them historically rather than literally, they made terror manageable. A household faced invisible danger, and instead of collapsing into helpless panic, it acted. It cleaned. It marked. It burned. It spoke. It called specialists. It restored order. The Ashipu priest stood at the center of that response. He was not merely an exorcist in the modern movie sense, waving arms dramatically in a dark room while everyone behaves unwisely near furniture. He was a trained ritual expert, diagnostician, healer, incantation specialist, scholar of omens, and technician of sacred procedures. He needed knowledge of symptoms, dreams, timing, protective substances, divine names, and textual formulas. He could work beside the Asu, the physician of herbs, bondage, mixtures, and bodily care. Mesopotamian healing did not divide the physical and spiritual as sharply as modern categories do. A ritual could accompany a medicine. A dream could matter as much as a fever. The Ashipu observed. How does the patient sleep? What dreams come? When did the cold spot appear? What oath was recently sworn? Was a grave neglected? Did a visitor arrive before the sickness? Did animals avoid the doorway? Did the mirror show wrongness? He listened to the house as much as the body. Then he chose the ritual. This is expertise, not improvisation. Architecture also answered the Gallu. Threshold deposits, guarded doors. Household shrines kept protective gods close. Small figurines could be placed in foundations or walls. Boundary stones, such as kuduru, carried divine symbols and curses against those who violated property or agreements. At palace gates stood lamasu, colossal human-headed winged bulls or lions, protective beings whose enormous stillness announced that this threshold was not undefended. A lamasu does not chase. It watches. Imagine one at night. The palace gate is high. The stone body is massive, muscles carved in controlled strength. Wings fold along the side. The human face looks forward with a calm that does not invite nonsense. Moonlight touches the beard and crown. A mortal intruder may fear guards. A spiritual intruder must meet the gaze of something older than ordinary defense. Yet even lamasu have limits. This is important. Protective spirits can guard against hostile demons, bad magic, wandering forces, and unauthorized intrusion. But the source warns that protection against Gallu is harder because the Gallu may be acting under Valini mandate. A guardian cannot always block lawful cosmic enforcement. It can protect the household from confusion, mistaken identity, hostile spirits, or premature claims. It may appeal to higher authority. It may delay. It may reveal, but it cannot simply cancel death law. That limit makes the rituals more poignant. The living are not trying to become immortal. They are trying to be correctly seen. Do not take the wrong person. Do not take one before the appointed time. Do not let a false demon imitate a lawful agent. Do not let the restless dead draw the living into confusion. Do not let pollution make the house visible to the underworld. Protective practice becomes a plea for proper order, not escape from all mortality. That is why these rituals are dark but strangely calm. They accept that death has authority. They ask that authority to remain in its rightful place. At night, a protected house becomes a layered object. Under the threshold, an amulet sleeps in clay. Near the doorway, a charm hangs. Inanna, a household shrine, holds offerings. A bronze mirror rests within reach. Smoke has touched the rafters. Salt has marked the floor. An Ashipu has spoken names in the corners. Outside, the street is dark. Inside, the family sleeps. Not perfectly safe. No one is perfectly safe, but held within layers of care, memory, craft, and ritual intelligence. This is the human answer to faceless law. To build boundaries of our own. To name what can be named. To hide what must not yet be found. To cleanse what has been touched. To ask the gods of light to reveal false faces. To keep the doorway from becoming too open. The fire beside us grows softer now. In the story, smoke curls under a Mesopotamian roof. A mother checks the charm at a child neck. An old man places the bronze mirror back on its hook. The Ashipu leaves before dawn, tired but composed, carrying the smell of cedar in his clothes. The Gallu remain possible. That possibility does not vanish. But the house has answered. And from the house, the fear spreads outward into all of Mesopotamian life, into burial, law, trade, royal funerals, court oaths, temple economy, and the later traditions that would inherit the idea of supernatural enforcement long after the clay tablets fell silent. The fear spreads outward into the city. It does not remain inside one house with one amulet beneath one threshold. A fear like the Gallu has a way of moving through brick, law, family, market, palace, cemetery, and temple. It becomes part of how people bury the dead, how they swear oaths, how they protect trade, how they teach children, how they imagine justice after the last breath has left the body. In Mesopotamia, death was not a private event only. It was social. It was legal. It was ritual. A person who died badly could trouble the living. A person who was not buried correctly could become restless. A family that neglected offerings might invite disorder. A king whose reign had been cruel could not assume that royal gold alone would impress the powers below. The underworld had memory, and if the Gallu were its officers, then the living world had reason to behave as if every act might one day be read as evidence. That is a powerful way to organize a society. Not always gentle, not always fair, but powerful. The source describes royal funerals as almost legal preparations for the afterlife. A king did not enter the underworld as an ordinary traveler with empty hands. His burial could include objects, offerings, symbols of status, records of public works, divine endorsements, and ritual affirmations that the ruler had fulfilled his earthly obligations. The tomb became not only a place of grief, but a dossier. Imagine a royal burial chamber prepared in dim light. The walls are cool. Oil lamps burn steadily. Servants move with slow care. Vessels are placed. Seals are arranged. Fine materials are brought near the body. Gold catches little points of fire. Lapis holds blue darkness. A weapon lies quiet beside a hand that will never lift it again. Priests speak formulas that are less like comfort and more like presentation. The burial chamber becomes an argument made to the underworld. Not a loud argument. A ritual argument. Objects speak. Offerings speak. Names speak. The body itself is arranged as if position can continue beyond breath. If the Gallu are agents of cosmic law, then the burial must give that law the right information. The dead person must not be mistaken for the abandoned, the polluted, the oath-breaker, or the one without support. Common burials carried the same logic on a smaller scale. The body might be oriented carefully, often toward the west in traditions associated with the setting sun and the road of the dead. Hands might hold identifying objects. Food and drink might be provided. The grave might be constructed with care enough to show that this person belonged to a household, a lineage, a recognized human network. A poor burial was not simply poor. It was dangerous. To be buried without care was to risk entering the underworld without proper recognition. To be forgotten was to become vulnerable. To have no descendants or no offerings was to suffer hunger in the dark. And in the shadow of the Gallu, such failures were not sentimental mistakes. They were failures of transition. Picture a modest grave. No gold. No rich chamber. Only packed earth. A clay vessel. Perhaps a small personal object. A few words spoken by tired relatives. The wind moves dust over their ankles. Someone pours water. Someone says the name. A child watches without fully understanding, but the shape of the ritual enters the child anyway. That is enough. Perhaps. Enough to say, this one is known. Enough to say, the road is not abandoned. Enough to say, do not let the wrong forces seize what has already been given properly to the dead. The source suggests that Gallu belief shaped law as well. Oaths in Mesopotamia were not simply private promises. They were witnessed by gods. To break a contract, lie in court, violate a boundary, or betray an obligation was not only socially risky, it could attract supernatural consequence. The fear that divine enforcers might one day answer falsehood gave weight to legal language. Imagine a court scene. A scribe sits with wet clay. The parties stand before witnesses. A boundary dispute. Perhaps a debt. A broken agreement. A merchant swears that the goods were delivered. Another says they were not. The judge listens. The scribe writes. The oath is spoken before gods whose names make the air heavier. No Gallu appears. That is the point. The fear is enough. The unseen officer in the underworld gives gravity to the spoken word above. If a lie is recorded before the gods, the liar has not only fooled a neighbor, he has placed himself inside a larger account, one that may continue after death. Social control does not require constant punishment when people believe punishment can arrive later with perfect memory. Merchants also lived under this atmosphere. Trade in Mesopotamia reached across dangerous distances. Caravans moved through desert roads, mountains, foreign territories, river routes, and cities where strangers could be allies or threats. Goods traveled, but so did vows, debts, risks, and fears. The source mentions protective rituals for trading expeditions and the economic life around amulets, encens, specialists, and protective services. A merchant leaving home might buy a charm before departure, not because he was foolish, because the road was full of uncertainty. Bandi, illness, bad water, hostile spirits, broken promises, dead travelers, angry gods of unfamiliar places. A small amulet tied under clothing might not stop every danger, but it gave the journey structure. It told the traveler that the world had unseen rules, and that some of those rules could be addressed. At dawn, the merchant stands near the gate. The road begins. Every long road is a conversation with risk. Temple economies grew around this need for protection. Amulet makers, incense traders, carvers, scribes who copied incantations, priests trained in diagnostic rituals, craftsmen who made figurines for foundations, sellers of cedar oil, salt, special woods, small stones, beads, and metals associated with protective force. Fear was spiritual, but it was also practical, social, and economic. A city full of invisible danger needs many visible tools. The source also describes education. Demonological classifications were taught and preserved. Students learned names, categories, symptoms, incantatio, and protective protocols. This is important because it shows that fear of beings like the Gallu was not only folk panic. It entered textual culture. It became something educated people cataloged. The tablet house did not teach only grammar and accounts. It also taught danger. A student might copy a list of spirits and demons, learning which being caused what sign, which ritual applied, which god should be called, which substance should be burned, which words must not be miswritten. A wrong sign could change a formula. A careless hand could weaken protection. The teacher might wrap the tablet or the student's knuckles. Ancient education appears to have been very committed to making children regret small mistakes. And yet, the stakes were real in their world. To name correctly was to diagnose correctly. To diagnose correctly was to protect. The Gallu also reinforced personal and household religion. People had personal gods, protective spirits, household shrines, and divine patrons who could intercede or shield against many dangers. Lamassu and other protective beings could guard thresholds, but the source stresses a limit. A personal god might protect against hostile forces, but could not always block a legally authorized Gallu mission. This limit made the cosmos coherent. No patron could turn the universe into a private favor machine. No king could buy complete immunity. No family could amulet itself into immortality. Protection worked within law, not against law. That is the hard Mesopotamian wisdom. Ritual does not abolish death. It keeps death in proper order. It prevents mistakes, pollution, premature claims, malicious interference, and restless wandering. It may delay or redirect danger. But when the correct time comes, and the correct authority sends the correct officer, the world must yield. The Gallu, therefore, made death culture stricter. Mourn properly. Bury properly. Pour offerings. Honor ancestors. Do not neglect the dead. Do not break oaths. Do not assume status will protect you from cosmic jurisdiction. In such a society, the fear of the Gallu is also a moral technology. It teaches people to maintain bonds with the dead and obligations to the living. It turns grief into action. It turns law into sacred seriousness. It makes a broken promise feel heavier because somewhere below, a court may remember. This belief also shaped royal ideology. The Gallu sit at the dark end of that logic. They are what happens when order must be enforced from below. The Gallu may echo faintly in later ideas of supernatural agents who execute divine or infernal commands, not as exact identity, as ancestry of imagination. That distinction matters. The Gallu endure because they touch a fear that is larger than one culture. The fear that justice may arrive without tenderness. The fear that a boundary once crossed cannot be uncrossed. The fear that a name written in a hidden court may matter more than all the words spoken in defense above ground. And yet, their belief also gave people tools. Bury the dead. Protect the threshold. Tell the truth under oath. Keep offerings. Call the expert when the house feels wrong. Respect the door between worlds. A fear that has a ritual can become livable. That may be why Mesopotamian demonology became so detailed. It did not remove fear. It organized it. Organization is one of humanity's oldest comforts. Even when the subject is death, a list can help. A name can help. A procedure can help. A small amulet under a threshold can let a family sleep. The fire beside us lowers. Imagine a city at night. Nippur, Babylon, Nineveh, any of the old places where clay once held the names of the living and dead. Lamps flicker behind mud brick walls. Dogs sleep near doorways. A merchant dreams of the road. A widow pours water for the dead. A scribe dries a tablet near the hearth. A king sleeps behind guarded walls. Beneath thresholds, small charms lie in the dust, unseen but trusted. And below all of it, Ereshkigal remains. The underworld court does not sleep as humans sleep. Ereshkigal throne is still. Nergal heat is dark. The Gallu wait until called. They do not fill the night with random malice. They are not loose in every shadow. They are worse in a quieter way. They are available to law. That thought, more than any grotesque image, explains their place in Mesopotamian life. The Gallu made cosmic order feel enforceable. They made death feel official. They turned the unseen boundary into something that could enter a house, a court, a palace, a dream. Now their influence passes beyond the ancient city, into later memory, modern misreadings, forged tablets, horror films, occult handbooks, and the work of scholars trying to separate real clay from modern fantasy. The Gallu have survived, but not always accurately. And the final work of the story is to bring them back from sensational darkness into the older, colder truth, that they were never terrifying because they were wild. They were terrifying because they were authorized. They were terrifying because they were authorized. That is the detail modern stories often lose. When old demons pass into modern imagination, they become louder. They grow extra teeth, extra flames, extra theatrical habits. They leap from shadows. They shout. They crawl on ceilings. They become useful for posters, trailers, and the sort of scene where a person opens the door that any sensible adult would have left firmly closed. But the Gallu were not frightening because they were dramatic. They were frightening because they were correct. Correct in the severe underworld sense. Correct because the mandate had been issued. Correct because the boundary had been violated or the soul had been marked. Correct because Ereshkigal court and the Anunnaki order stood behind them. Their dread was not rebellion, but procedure. The source warns against modern distortions. And this matters. In recent decades, stories about lost Gallu tablets, secrete ritual fragments, forbidden underworld texts, and private collections have circulated with the familiar smell of sensationalism. One example the source mentions is a claim around a London private collection in 2019, where alleged Gallu-related tablet fragments drew interest before doubts began to gather. At first, such stories always feel tempting. A sealed tablet, a lost ritual, a private collector, a hidden demonology too dangerous for museums. It sounds like the beginning of a thriller, which is exactly why caution is needed. Real tablets are rarely so polite as to arrange themselves into modern drama. Real scholarship is slower, drier, and more useful. Provenance matters. Sign forms matter. Grammar matters. Clay composition matters. Excavation records matter. If a text has linguistic anachronisms, suspicious wording, modern-looking signs, or a provenance that begins in fog and ends in a sales room, the excitement must cool. The source says that such alleged fragments were later treated with serious doubt, and in some cases classified as likely modern forgeries. A forged tablet is more than a fake object. It is noise added to an already difficult conversation. Imagine a modern examination room. White light, magnifying lenses, a tablet fragment on a padded surface. Scholars leaning close, not with the romance of treasure hunters, but with the disciplined suspicion of people who know that clay can lie when modern hands teach it to. One person notices a sign form that belongs too late. Another sees grammar that feels stitched together from dictionaries. Another asks where the object was excavated. The room grows quieter. The clay may be old. The writing may not be. That is a different kind of ghost. A forgery uses the authority of antiquity to sell a modern desire. The Gallu deserve better than that. So do the ancient scribes. Modern occult traditions have also adapted Gallu imagery, sometimes presenting them as beings that can be summoned, controlled, commanded, or used as allies in magical practice. The source pushes back against this strongly because it reverses the ancient function. In Mesopotamian terms, the Gallu were not casual helpers waiting for a modern practitioner to call them like very gloomy assistants. They were underworld enforcers. Their power came from mandate, not availability. To imagine them as controllable personal spirits is to misunderstand the core terror. A Gallu is not a pet doorway demon. It is not an employee. It is not impressed by confidence, candles, expensive robes, or someone mispronouncing Akkadian with great enthusiasm. There is a little humor there, but the point is serious. Ancient ritual specialists did not treat the Gallu lightly. They did not assume that a person could simply command such forces. They used defense, misdirection, purification, concealment, appeals to higher gods, and careful diagnosis. That humility is part of the authentic tradition. Modern horror also distorts them. A film wants visible fear. It wants a chase, a shriek, a face in the corner, perhaps a few impossible shadows moving very quickly. The Gallu can fit that if simplified into generic demons. But then their most distinctive feature disappears. They become chaotic, evil beings, when in the source they are almost the opposite. They are not chaos. They are the machinery that comes when chaos has disturbed law. That is a colder horror. A monster may be defeated by courage. A legal officer of the dead must be answered by the structure of the cosmos. That difference makes the Gallu less cinematic, but more haunting. They do not need to appear in every dark room. They wait until the proper condition is met. Real scholarship moves in another direction. Not sensational, passion. Archaeologists and Assyriologists continue to examine tablets from major archives, including materials from places like Nineveh, Nippur, Mari, and other Mesopotamian sites. Many tablets remain damaged, fragmentary, difficult to read, or unpublished. Digital imaging, reflectance, transformation, imaging, multispectral photography, and shared databases allow faint signs to be seen more clearly. A broken wedge that once seemed useless can become part of a line. A line can connect to another fragment. A fragment can change how we understand a ritual. This work is slow. It is also powerful. A tablet does not need to be dramatic to matter. A line in an incantation, a demon list, a ritual instruction, a diagnostic omen, a lexical entry explaining a word. These small pieces help rebuild the ancient world more reliably than any invented secret text. Imagine a damaged tablet under digital light. To the naked eye, the surface is uneven, almost mute. The clay is broken along one edge. Several signs are worn. But when the light shifts across it from many angles, shallow wedges appear. A scholar reads slowly. One sign. Then another. Perhaps the word Gallu is not even fully preserved, only enough context to suggest the category. That is how real knowledge often arrives, not as thunder, but as a partial line made legible after centuries. Such scholarship matters beyond demonology. The Gallu touch many fields. Anthropology, because they show how societies manage death, fear. Psychology, because faceless agents express the terror of impersonal fate. Law, because they reveal how ancient people sacralized contracts, oaths, and social obligations. Religion, because they show an underworld governed by authority rather than pure chaos. Death studies, because they connect burial, mourning, and afterlife passage. Social history, because they shaped households, economies, professions, and rituals of protection. A demon can reveal a civilization. That may sound strange, but it is true. The beings a culture fears tell us what that culture values. Mesopotamians feared disorder, neglected rites, broken boundaries, oath violations, improper death, and uncontrolled contact with the underworld. The Gallu embody those fears in one faceless office. They are not the fear of evil as temptation. They are the fear of consequence. Return now to the ancient house. The modern screen fades. The forged tablets fade. The horror posters fade. The private collector room fades. We are back in a city of mud brick at night. The air is warm outside, but one room holds a careful coolness from thick walls. A lamp burns near a niche. The family has eaten. A child sleeps. A small amulet lies beneath the threshold, buried when the house was made. A bronze mirror hangs on the wall. Cedar smoke from an earlier ritual still clings faintly to the roof beams. No Gallu stands there tonight. That is important. The fear exists, but the room is safe for now. The house is protected. The dead have been honored. The offerings have been made. The oaths, one hopes, have not been broken. The doorway knows its charm. The household gods have received their portion. The names of the ancestors have not been allowed to fade entirely. Life continues above the underworld. This is the gentler side of the story. The Gallu are frightening, but their existence also clarifies what the living must do. Care for the dead. Respect boundaries. Keep promises. Protect the home. Call experts when the unseen world presses too near. Do not treat death as a toy. Do not assume grief has no duties. The Gallu make the universe stricter. They also make it legible. That may be why the idea survived so powerfully. People can live with fear if they know what fear asks of them. The unknown becomes less shapeless when it has a name. Gallu, carrier away. Underworld officer. Faceless agent. Not random nightmare, but the severe hand of a system. The source final warning is against losing that nuance. If we make the Gallu only monsters, we flatten them. If we make them only symbols, perhaps we miss their ritual seriousness. If we make them controllable modern spirits, we misunderstand their authority. The older image is stranger and more valuable. They are the enforcement of a boundary. They are what arrives when life and death must stop bargaining. They are the reminder that in Mesopotamian thought, even the underworld had order, and order had hands. Now, listen to the fire. It is low, almost ash. The wood shifts with a small settling sound. The candle flame is shorter. The room around us is not ancient Mesopotamia, but for a moment, the old architecture of fear is easy to imagine. Doorway, threshold, cham, mirror, nama, tablet, court below, officer waiting beyond sight. The Gallu do not need to be near. They belong back in their texts tonight, back in the dim lines of cuneiform, in the underworld passages, in the stories of Inanna and Dumuzi, in the ritual knowledge of the Ashipu, in the memory of households that took thresholds seriously. Let them return there. Let Ereshkigal sit in Irkalla without calling a name. Let Nergal stand in the dark heat of war without dispatching a servant. Let the Anunnaki court close its tablets for the night. Let the amulet under the door sleep in dust. Let the bronze mirror show only the room. This is the calm at the end of the dread, not denial, not certainty. Only the quiet recognition that old fears can be understood without being invited. We can study the Gallu, speak their name softly, follow their mythic function, and then leave them where they belong, at the boundary of the great below. The ancient Mesopotamians imagined many terrible beings, but the Gallu remain among the most unsettling because they do not hunger for chaos. They do not revel in cruelty. They do not tempt the soul toward error. They come after the error, after the verdict, after the balance has been disturbed. They are not the crime. They are the consequence. And consequence is one of the oldest ghosts. The tablet is still now. The museum light dims. The house at night is quiet. No cold footsteps cross the threshold. No wrong face appears in the bronze. No warrant opens beneath the floor. Only the fire remains, soft and low, and the thought that for one more night, the boundary holds. Good night.